Hello, welcome to the Media Club. I'm your host, Matt Deegan. On the show today, it's the latest RAJAR figures. Plus, as new local radio regulations kick in, what does it mean for the big commercial players? Media analyst Adam Bowie tells us what's happening. Also on the programme, TV bigwigs descend on Cannes for Mipcom. But is there the appetite for new deals? Deadline's Jake Kanter puts down his cocktail and tells us more. All that plus Kimberley Godbolt of Freelance Network Talented People takes the temperature of UK TV production. That's all happening in this edition of the Media Club. Come on in. Adam and Kimberley, welcome to the Media Club. So, Adam, who have you got on your list to join and get some membership?
So I'm going to say Ted Danson.
Ted Danson, ooh, celebrity. Why Ted?
Well, it's interesting because he's got a podcast and I'm not sure we really need lots of celebrities doing even more podcasts where they interview other celebrities. But actually, his one's quite good.
Oh.
And this week, he had Kelsey Grammer on. And I was slightly unaware of this. Apparently, there had been a bit of a falling out between them, and they made up, and there was lots of apologies. First of all, he's got a great voice, Ted Danson, and so it's enormously listenable. And Kelsey Grammer's not got a bad voice either. So for an hour and a half, it's actually lovely. They've got Woody Harrelson on. He was zooming in from Hungary where he was making a film, because it's actually Ted with sometimes Woody Harrelson is the podcast. But it was just really nice. And what's interesting is I think the podcast was probably dropped earlier this week, but then it takes about a day or so for the press to suddenly someone somewhere listen to it and go, oh, that's a story. And they write it up, and then suddenly, even today, as we record this, there are loads, all the usual tabloids have suddenly picked up on this story, and it's kind of, well, I listened to this like a day and a half ago. Where have you been, guys? So it's quite funny, but it's a nice story. It's a lovely podcast. There's some really good back episodes. Kristen Bell was an absolutely lovely one. They made The Good Place together a few years ago, and yeah, it is a famous person interviewing their mate, but that was just a really nice one, and it was very heartfelt and very odd that it ended up straying into religion and all kinds of things. It would not go where you would expect that kind of podcast.
The best kind of shows. We'll put a link in the show notes. So yes, Ted can join. Also, it'll be useful behind a bar. That's handy as well. And Kimberley, who would you like to give some membership to this week?
So I would like you, please, to put Havana Marking's name on the door. Havana is a director. She's just released her latest film, which is the feature doc called Undercover, Exposing the Far Right, which is utterly jaw-dropping. And its debut was supposed to be at the London Film Festival, but the organisers pulled it due to safety concerns, which obviously was a shame, but also sort of highlights how remarkable and sort of dangerous the whole thing was. And I just think, well, she deserves membership. She deserves a bit of safety. I mean, the contributors probably we should let them come in too. I can't quite believe they're not having to go into witness protection right now. But if you haven't seen it, it's on Channel 4 now, who did debut it after it couldn't go out to the film festival. I'd urge you to watch it. It's a very important doc.
We'll put a link to that as well. So yes, they definitely can both join. Excellent, new members.
Right.
Lots of changes in radio this week, especially radio regulations. Obviously, a topic kind of close to my heart. It's a bit geeky, but I think actually it tells us quite a lot about the changing nature of media. Adam, what have the government changed, and what's being pushed through now by Ofcom?
Yeah, so we've had this Media Act, or various elements of the Media Act, which went through Parliament. It kind of got rushed through in the sort of wash up before the general election early in the summer. And effectively, it removes a lot of the localisation, or at least the programmes being originated in the local area. So most local commercial stations are still going to have requirements on things like local news, but exactly where the programmes are made, and it effectively allows for complete networking in effect. They'll probably they'll do local news, and they'll do local weather, and the ads will be localized as well in accordance with however makes the most sense.
And this obviously has been a bit of a journey. I mean, this has sort of been happening for 20 years or more, but we've kind of now got to the point where the big groups, so particularly Global and Bauer, Wireless have a little bit of a few local radio stations, and some other operators can decide entirely how they run their radio stations. They don't have to have any local programming at all. And Bauer have been pretty quick out the blocks, and they made some announcements around greatest hits radio.
Yeah, that's right. To the point, it'd been recently, you had to have basically one probably quite chunky show on, drive time is being used in a lot, or sometimes it'll be the breakfast show, and they're fully going for, I think Kate Thornton is taking the place of something like 6 or 8 other shows across the network. So Greatest Hits Radio will be the same for everybody everywhere they hear it, and that's sort of gone through. They've almost done that the instant the flag has dropped.
I mean, obviously, it's sad for people who've lost their jobs. Also, I mean, I know I get messages from people asking me, what have you heard? What have you heard? Obviously, Global, probably a big decision for them about what happens on Heart, Smooth and Capital, which all have elements of local or regional programming. Bauer themselves have what was their sort of very much local FM networks, now called The Hits, now called Hits Radio, and they have a lot of local breakfast shows. Do you think local's all gone across all of these, or do you think there's some value in doing local radio as a ratings winner?
I suspect it'll be on a case-by-case basis, to be perfectly honest, where you've got a really good breakfast show and it's beating the opposition and it's really driving listening locally, then, frankly, there will be a cost calculation there coming up. Does it, you can save some money by not having them, but you'll lose some listenership potentially by cutting that show. On the other hand, the saved costs, having a single show, maybe making it bigger, maybe putting some of that money into a star presenter or something. It sounds very cutthroat, and it is very cutthroat because that's where we've got to. There are some really strong shows. I think it's always kind of interesting when you get to somewhere like Scotland or something where they have people do want to hear local programming, and you might make a different decision in some of those regions. But I do know the Hits, they have got some big shows on that, and you're potentially giving that up.
And obviously we've just got RAJAR figures that came out yesterday. Interesting looking at them, and particularly looking at Global and Bauer as a whole. The big commercial radio groups. Global's had a pretty good time over the last 12 months. Bauer pretty static. Do you think that's connected to what they're putting out, or vagaries of radio changes? Why is that the case?
Yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, Bauer has had a bit of a ride with Greatest Hits, and they've sort of been growing that. Obviously, a year or so ago, they got Kane Bruce, and he's sort of up to 4 million or so now. That is a big show for them. But that's kind of peaked out now, and this quarter, Greatest Hits is kind of flattened because they were turning on new stations, they were rebranding other stations to become Greatest Hits, and they haven't got anything left to rebrand in effect. It's either Greatest Hits or some of their other brands. Whereas Global, so they flattened a little bit, and there was a period of time where Bauer, are they going to reach Global? And I'm not sure that doesn't look like it's happening at the moment. Global is a bit of a step ahead of where Bauer is. So whether these changes will make a difference or not, I mean, there definitely have been changes. We've seen some jobs go at Bauer, particularly in some of their programming departments. I think all of that's really too early to say, particularly, getting into the nerdiness of this. These are 6-month figures, so it takes quite a while sometimes for these changes to roll through into the numbers.
I mean, it was interesting. I wrote on a blog post the other day, a line that Bauer put in a press release just a couple of weeks ago, and it was sort of a group press release, so sort of across all their German company, sort of describing all of their markets. In audio, Bauer's pursuing a growth strategy based on a lean broadcasting business and investing in digital audio offerings, as well as enhancing efficiency and collaboration. I mean, I think that's a really honest statement, but it's not a particularly motivating one. It's sort of saying, we're aiming for lean broadcasting. We're not going to be investing in these core brands. If you look at Magic or Absolute or Kiss, they haven't had the main sort of mother brands haven't had a great time in the past few quarters, have they?
No, we've certainly seen things like Absolute 80s overtaking Absolute Radio. I mean, the network is kind of doing fine. Actually, I think it's possibly had some of its strongest numbers in the case of Absolute. I should disclaim I used to work there. But, is that just moving around, I'm not going to use the shuffling deck chairs around on the Titanic, but I just have. No, but it's kind of, do you think that there is, extra growth coming from it? And, I don't know, you can make things lean. We've all seen media groups kind of thin things down. Let's just kind of make it as efficient as possible. Does efficiency need to growth? I'm not sure. I think, you still need to do something, be creative, I think. And some of the success stories you see elsewhere suggest that being creative it does kind of pay off.
Aren't most radio networks just chucking massive pots of money into competitions now as well? I think every single different network I flick between is just a huge answer the phone and tell me how much is in the prize pot.
Yeah, I mean, for Bauer, this is a big part of their strategy. They run a cash competition across all of their radio stations, so what they call the RAJAR networks, their new app. And I think one of the challenges is they give away so much money. I think it's £400,000 this week if you want to enter. £2.50 a text. You can also ring, and it's free. 100. You can do 100 of those a week, and that's in the smaller print of there. But I think one of the challenges is it doesn't seem special anymore. Like previously, you give away 400 grand. That's an amazing thing, but it's on every one of their stations, so you're not really using it to compete. And sort of the presenters get a bit bored saying it, and it doesn't really have the push. I mean, the problem is they make so much money from this, don't they?
Yeah, I think, and look, they're not the only ones doing this. You can turn on daytime ITV, or Good Morning Britain or whatever, and they've always got these sorts of shows, and it's these giveaways, and it's kind of, as you say, what's different, what's special about it. If you look at the way you can do with radio promotions, they can be enormously powerful, and you can do incredibly creative things and make interesting programming out of it and do stunts and all that kind of stuff. And this is profitable. It's clearly profitable, and all their marketing just about feels like it's just about we can win a lot of money this week, and so it just comes
easy,
back
isn't
to
it? It's not like complicated like a format or some sort of clever
Well,
device.
also you get addicted to the cash, so you just have to make it more and more efficient, and that kind of makes it duller and duller.
It does seem to make like a 10 grand prize pot seem a bit rubbish now, which is madness, isn't it, when you think about it?
Absolutely, and again, it's like what you can do with competitions, there's people who enter them, there's a lot of people that don't enter them. What's the passive entertainment value of it? So can you play along at home whilst other people are playing? And often if you play along at home, that encourages you to take part as well. But if you make it sort of super efficient and just using it for cash, which is what I hear is a growing, a very significant growing part of their business, I think you can get sort of addicted to that money. What else was in RAJAR, Adam? Anything else that caught your
BBC had a good quarter. I think we saw, obviously it was a big quarter for news and sport, so we saw Radio 4 do well. 5 Live did really exceptionally well. They're up to 6 million for the first time since over 10 years or so at this point, and it's their 30th anniversary, so I think they're absolutely chuffed to bits. Obviously they had the end of the Euros, the Olympics, Paralympics, Wimbledon, beginning of the football season, Golf Open. I mean, there was a lot of sport there, so that played to their strength on it. But sport doesn't be all the end all. You saw TalkSport took a little bit of a dip, but and other news stations did well. I mean, interestingly, GB News had their biggest ever numbers.
So GB News did well, and it did better than Talk Radio, branded as Talk now. That's a lot of changes over the last couple of years, and also bigger than Times Radio. I mean, you would be annoyed if you were at News UK and you saw that GB News had jumped ahead of you.
I think so, and I mean it's interesting. You've got those 3 there, and News UK have got 2 of those, and it's kind of like and they're very similar sized actually. But if you look at how much they must cost in comparison to one another, I mean, I say that GB News has lost however much it lost this year, and it was quite a lot. So that's I suspect that News UK are being a lot more efficient than that with their creative, but. I think we've always got to be a little bit careful. I would not ever criticize the methodology or whatever, but there might be some people who are watching TV who are ticking a radio diary when you've got the same thing with the same content.
Well, also some of RAJAR now works on people meters, so it records passive audio to work out what you've listened to, and that opens some interesting questions about the TV audio and what's recorded. And I've put a question into RAJAR to ask them about how that works.
Oh, whether Big Brother is listening when we're watching
Well,
telly.
well, more that if you've got the radio wristwatch on that's measuring your radio listening, if you're watching GB News on the TV, does that pick it up and add it to the radio figures?
Okay.
So I think all these things get more complex. All these sort of edge cases pop up, don't they?
Absolutely.
Stay there, Adam and Kimberley. We'll be back with you shortly. But it was Mipcom this week, where TV makers, channels and distributors descend on Cannes to sell their formats to the international market. Deadline's Jake Kanter was there and joins us down the line, not from Cannes, I think from his house. He is back. Did you have a good time in Cannes?
Well, the sun was shining all week. It felt like British summertime. And that was just the weather, so that was good. But yes, it was a successful trip. It was an interesting market. I think it was perhaps a bit quieter than it has been in previous years, and there are lots of different reasons for that. I think there's clearly some budget and belt tightening going on across the industry, as Media Club listeners will be well aware of. I think that. The fact that MIP TV isn't taking place next year, the rise of doing these things online and taking meetings all year round via video calls means that these markets are sort of less essential, less urgent than they once were, but they remain a really important staging post for the industry, a great opportunity for people to get together, do deals and to talk shop, and that's what it felt like this week was all about.
So last year, people were sort of saying that it was survive until 25 in television, but this year it's stay in the mix till 2026. Would you agree with that?
So this phrase has really taken root in the industry, the survive till 2025, and I think it was from a Guardian piece quite recently. I actually think it's quite a reductive and unhelpful quote. The idea that things are suddenly going to turn a corner next year are just not true. And I would say the same of 2026. I think what the industry has gone through is a period of significant readjustment. Budgets have been tightened, and the type of content that we are seeing commissioned right across the world, and importantly for Media Club listeners in the UK and the US, has changed dramatically. And it's going to be a tricky period for the foreseeable future. There is this sense that mid-market shows are not what they once were. And we're seeing very high-end production and very low-end production. I think there is some truth in that, and that is one that's a theory that is being constantly talked about. But I do not think that the survive till 2025 phrase is particularly helpful, and I don't think it applied to many of the conversations I was having in MIP.
So obviously, UK exports huge amounts of television. Who was making a big splash? Who's really going for it out there?
Well, I think it was quite interesting because the presence of big UK producers and studios was somewhat stripped back this year. So usually you associate Mipcom with big, lavish stands on the Palais by the sea, but that wasn't quite the case this year. I think some of the big themes that I took away was that there's a continued reticence around risk in the market, and particularly as far as unscripted formats are concerned, we saw a big lean into nostalgia. Nostalgia was king, so you've got companies like Warner Brothers, Discovery. Their big sort of new formats at the market were a Harry Potter baking show and a Friends game show. And then, and this was very striking actually on the Palais, right at the entrance. This is, big building with a red carpet out in front. BBC Studios have their stand, and there was an enormous poster of The Weakest Link. And I must say, standing on the Palais and looking up at that poster, it felt like I've been transported back to the year 2000. It was quite a strange sensation, I have to say.
That's definitely an old format. Clearly, it's doing good business for BBC Studios around the world. Then, did it seem like a creative place, or is it sort of returning back to classics, good classics that can sell?
Yeah, I think, look, there are always going to be creative, fun formats that emerge at these markets, but it was dominated by what we know and love and what we've seen in the past, and sort of reiterating on well-loved brands. One of the buzziest formats at the market was Stranded on Honeymoon Island, which is from the creators of Married at First Sight. It's kind of Survivor meets Married at First Sight. It's a big new show. It's been picked up by the BBC here in the UK. Even that, as I say, that's a new format, but it has echoes of things that have gone before it. And also, I think it has raised questions for the BBC itself. Where there are a lot of producers who will tell you that the BBC shouldn't be buying formats from other countries. They should be trying to encourage the creation of a new generation of British intellectual property. So there are a few moans and groans about the BBC going big for that particular show.
Well, next year we're going to strand you at Mipcom Island. That's our big new format. Thank you for the update, and we'll see you soon. Okay, guys, would you like to be stranded on Honeymoon Island?
Depends what the drink's like.
Never been somewhere really hot.
And there's more from Adam and Kimberley after the break. Here at the Media Club, we've been podcasting for over 10 years, longer if you count the Guardian shows as well. We've released over 300 episodes covering everything, from Strictly scandals to the death of linear television. And one thing we've learned along the way is that quality audio and video are key to keeping our listeners coming back. That's why we trust Podshop Studios for all of our recording needs. With expert engineers and cutting-edge equipment, Podshop delivers professional recordings every time. Whether you're a newcomer or a seasoned pro like us, it's the perfect place to create a standout podcast. And right now, you can get 25% off your first booking at Podshop Studios by using the code MEDIACLUB at podshoponline.co.uk. Don't wait, take your podcast to the next level at Podshop Studios.
Hello Media Club listeners, Patrick here from Podcast Discovery, the podcast marketing company, where this week we've been thinking about podcasting internationally. You might consider yourself a bit of a podcasting expert. Perhaps you've launched shows in the US and Australia. But it could be that in doing so, you've never once thought about what we can learn from podcasters in Scandinavia, China, or Latin America. And, well, maybe you should. You can speak to us about that or anything else to do with podcast marketing by heading to podcastdiscovery.com. That's podcastdiscovery.com.
Welcome back to the Media Club. What have we been talking about this week? Well, spare a thought for Greatest Hits radio presenter Andy Goulding, who hours after his feature with the Radio Times was published, received the news that his show was to end with the local radio changes that we talked about earlier. Complex PR arrangements there for that. In November, City University is hosting a British Podcast Awards showcase, hearing from a selection of this year's gold winners. That includes Victoria, Derbyshire. Tickets are free, and there's a link in our show notes. And Roger Alton, former editor of The Observer, has come out in support of the Tortoise takeover, telling Press Gazette that the Guardian's owners want to wash its hands of the paper. He likened the Scott Trust's view of The Observer to an unwanted and charismatic neighbour arriving at a sedate family dinner, which I think begs the question, Adam and Kimberley, which newspapers would you invite to a dinner party? Brand-wise, who'd be a fun person to have?
Oh, is there a right or wrong answer here? There could well be, couldn't there?
I feel like the Daily Star would be quite a laugh, but they might get drunk.
I'd sit them right next to the FT, just for entertainment value.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I don't think I could quite let anyone from the Daily Mail over my threshold, but it would be entertaining, I suppose.
Yes, you definitely get the gossip.
Yeah.
Kimberley, your company, Talented People, obviously is all about individuals getting them jobs, both full-time jobs, freelance jobs. TV has been in a flux for quite a long period now. Yeah. What's the current status? How are you seeing the market?
Oh, it's still very complicated. But I think the sense amongst the freelance community is a sort of, and again, I'm talking so broadly here, but it's definitely polarised in that the people who are doing well and haven't been out of work are doing really well and still haven't been out of work, and they seem to be in sort of more premium content world.
Is that sort of, there are verticals that are just have done okay, so it's like drama and Netflix type drama?
Exactly.
Things okay.
I'd say sort of true crime, premium factual, sport and sort of music related things seem to still be getting commissioned, sort of, still not in the sort of same volume, but the people working in those areas are doing fine. Some are acutely aware that a lot of people are not doing so well, and others have just been head down and they haven't seen it. And the people who are not doing so well, unfortunately, I feel, and we have sort of sensed this kind of reluctant acceptance now of the situation, that things have changed, are changing, and they need to either kind of reskill or pivot or find something else and come back when the market is kind of stabilized. And obviously those conversations are all very difficult. And then conversely to freelancers, with the people who are in-house, we're very much feeling that they are incredibly pushed and overworked, and not to mention, pretty nervous, looking over their shoulder, with all these cuts still happening. But ultimately feeling grateful to have a job, but being worked harder than ever before, whilst some are experiencing a kind of survivor's guilt, which is certainly something we've been talking to people about, feeling dreadfully guilty that they are in work still. But, I think some casualties of the situation as well are people from underrepresented groups. And, we've seen that happens, unfortunately, in times where the economy is struggling or uncertainty, that, commissioners and hiring managers and execs, they kind of go back to the safe bet, or what they deem the safe bet, which is incredibly boring and eye-roll inducing for many, but unfortunately is rife. And it's, I guess, up to companies like us and, people who are sort of championing those from underrepresented groups, by the way, who are not junior, who are still brilliant, just are not known yet to certain companies. But when the stakes are so high, because there are so few commissions and they are high value and they have to be delivered and they have to be amazing and they have to be hugely hit rating, you can sort of see why people are defaulting to that excellent director that either Netflix or Apple has suggested or that they have worked with before. It's just a shame. Yes.
And are the UK broadcasters, so particularly I guess ITV and Channel 4, BBC's been a little bit better at this. Is this sort of cyclical or structural? Because there's a lot of you like, when it comes back, is it going to come back at the same level, or has there been a sort of reset with where the advertising money has changed and that's unlikely to come back?
It's definitely structural. We all know that things go in peaks and troughs in this industry, but this is a seismic shift, as people have said before. It definitely feels different, and I don't doubt that things will come back better and there will be more work to some varying degrees next year, but it still will look different, and I don't think people will still know what that will look like yet. But I think with things like talented people have been working with UK TV, and Channel 4 now have just signed up with us on our diversity partnership initiative, which is fantastic, which is hoping to answer a little bit of this issue with people, only hiring the people that they've worked with before, whereby, they are effectively funding searches through us for production companies to use to meet people from diverse backgrounds who they've never met before, which is brilliant and a really positive news story. We just need that happening more across the board.
If someone is kind of coming into the industry, or they feel there's a need to sort of reskill, what should people be concentrating on, or what are the things they should be skilling up with to give themselves the best chance?
That's why you do this job. That is a really good question. I feel like you need to find your niche and really go deep on that. Oh God, and
to be like an expert in something.
Yeah, I do, and that's really, it's kind of hedging your bets, because you've got to pick the right lane. So that's why people in true crime or in really premium docs or big global hit series have been fine, and they didn't necessarily make that strategic choice 5 years ago to be good at that. But they're the ones who are still, in work and doing well now. But I do think if you are really, really well versed in sport and you go, you bring something different to the table when you're, or at least something that is incredibly relevant compared to all the other showrunners, for example, or heads, creative directors, when you're going to an interview at Box to Box, or you're going to an interview at Pitch International. It sounds like a no-brainer, but when there are so many people who are applying for one single job, I think you've got to find absolutely everything relevant you possibly can to be the one that turns the head, and also doing your homework. I mean, so many people who are getting interviews are still not watching loads of telly and are still turning up to chats, having not researched that production company. And, right now, if you get a chat, you've got to absolutely wow, because, and even then, there's a 1 in 10 chance of getting it, because there are 9 other brilliant people going for it, but you've got to do something that stands you out from the crowd.
Adam, skills are interesting as people evolve their careers. Radio and audio, obviously podcasting has given people a lot more opportunities. Something you've been writing about recently has been more research about podcast and podcast consumptions. Is it very different to how people consume linear radio?
It is. I mean, I think it's about fitting it in your day. Obviously, you can listen to podcasts on the go. That's kind of different to a lot of things. I think also the wealth of choice you've got. That's the thing. I mean, we're on a hopefully not too niche podcast, but we're in a niche area, and you can absolutely own your niche in that world. And the cost to entry is low. Anyone can start a podcast, and a lot of people have as a consequence. And that makes that leads to its own challenges. But you've certainly got that breadth, I guess, that comes from that.
And the other big thing, I think, is the explosion of video in podcasting, and different audiences want different things. I mean, I speak to a lot of podcasters who are somewhat aghast they have to do video now. Is it essential for a podcast to be filmed?
I think it depends what you're doing and who you're aiming it at. I think, not every podcast format is going to work. There's a decent amount of drama. I'm not sure. I mean, you're making a television program at that point if you're trying to visualize it, or at least an animation or something. On the other hand, if I'm aiming at sort of 15 to 34 year olds, probably you're going to need a visual element at the very least, I think. As part of your promotional strategy. And, if it's a chat show style podcast, then you might as well hire someone like this and have some cameras up. I come from an audio background, and part of me is kind of aghast at that. But that's the realities of it. And the consumption patterns are different. I'm pretty sure a lot of people, even when they're watching a YouTube video, it's on a tab and they're doing something else in another tab if they're on their laptop or whatever, or it's on a telly in the background while they're mooching around on a Saturday morning in their home or whatever. But and not necessarily eyes on like you might watch a big budget drama TV series. But yeah, I mean, I think you've got to think of it particularly for those kind of audiences.
It's funny, we've obviously video this podcast out, and we put that on YouTube, but we also put it on Spotify, where you can consume video. And all of our listeners would have been listeners before the videos have now popped up. And I was looking at some of the stats, and I think producer Matt will mind me sharing it with the audience. About a third of the people that consume the podcast watch some form of the video. So a bit of it, some of it, all of it. And the amount of minutes consumed, about 20% of its video, still to 80% audio. And I thought that was pretty high for an audience that had consumed it forever as audio, actually easily opting into the video side. I think it's sort of much stronger sometimes than people imagine.
I agree. And actually, I think that's brilliant. You wonder why people might want to come to YouTube to watch a podcast that they've been listening to forever. And I don't know, but ultimately what you're saying as well, Adam, is that it's, it's to convert people from socials, Although I think, as I understand it, converting people from watching a social clip into finding your podcast it's quite hard, because it's not a one-click wonder, is it? It's a difficult journey for people to think, and we're all so distracted the whole time. I can't remember what I was supposed to be cooking like right now, rather than just, I need to do that, 17 steps before I actually follow a podcast.
So we heard from Jake earlier from Can and Mipcom. So we have created a Mipcom related quiz. Let's see how much attention you've been paying to the trades. This week it's entitled Mipcom or ChatGPT. In light of the news this week that ITV is going to be using AI to shape its commissioning strategy, I'd like you to tell me which of the shows I'm pitching are from ChatGPT or were sold at Mipcom this week. We'll take it in turns. So, Kimberley, you can go first. We'll play Mipcom or ChatGPT. Right. A Tonic to Love Island. This new series takes a group of young people who experience intimacy anxiety to a paradise resort to undergo group and individual therapy. Mipcom, or is it ChatGPT?
Oh, that is definitely Mipcom.
That is. You know what it's called?
Virgin Islands.
Yes, Virgin Islands is coming to Channel 4. Do you think it's a good idea?
It made me very much cringe when I saw the title, but that, of course, is very Channel 4.
Yep.
And when you read more about it, I do think they are just going with the old grabby title and then getting you in through the door with the shock factor, and it will be about much more than that, or certainly I hope.
Okay.
It does sound like Richard Branson should be involved somehow, because he does have an island.
He does. And are they sponsoring it?
Be an interesting joint venture. Right, Adam, comedian Mel Gedroych presents Pictionary, the TV series adapted from the Mattel game. Mipcom or ChatGPT?
I mean, it's Mipcom because Mattel apparently are absolutely rinsing their entire catalogue of stuff for shows, movies, whatever.
Yeah. After the success of Barbie, they're just pushing on. Yes, correct. Right, Kimberley. Michael McIntyre is lawyer Will Case, navigating courtroom chaos and personal struggles weekly on BBC One. Mipcom or ChatGPT?
I'm picturing it. I'm going to go ChatGPT for that.
It is ChatGPT, but it could work.
It totally could. Surely this is ChatGPT is where all good telly ideas begin.
This is like Ludwig, the next level,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah. Adam, ordinary home cooks compete to host the ultimate dinner party with Jamie Oliver for Sky One. Mipcom or ChatGPT?
Sky One disappeared a while back, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think so. I'm going to say ChatGPT on that because it's got no knowledge of history.
Oh, that's very good. Yes, it was generated, and of course, Jamie would do it for Channel 4. Not a channel that no longer exists.
Well, that is basically Jamie does Come Dine with Me.
Oh,
Come Dine with
yeah,
Jamie.
it really is, yeah.
Maybe that'd be good. Yeah, good one. Okay, Kimberley. A Greek adaptation of popular US drama Monk. Is that Mipcom or ChatGPT?
Monk. There was a lot of adaptation chat at Mipcom, I heard. So I'm going to go Mipcom.
It is. It is joining Greek television very soon. Adam, Mind the Gap. A high-energy, word-based game show for ITV where contestants must complete phrases or sentences, battling the clock to win a jackpot. An Ant and Dec show. Mipcom or ChatGPT?
I've absolutely no idea. I'm not sure Mind the Gap really travels because unless you happen to live in London. I'm going to say ChatGPT, but I don't know.
It is very well done, which I think makes it a draw. So together you get to work on our format conversion process for next year's Mipcom.
Good. Did you have fun there on ChatGPT?
I think producer Matt did, yeah. Thank you both. How can people keep up with what you're up to, Kimberley?
Well, I'm very noisy on LinkedIn, so you can always find me on LinkedIn. And talentedpeople.tv is our website, and we are talking about hopefully bringing the Imposter Club podcast back. So go find that if you haven't already.
Catch up on the back issues.
Yeah, exactly. It's many hours of me rambling to very senior people in the industry, being incredibly vulnerable about how they got where they got to. So I'm looking for victims for next series. So
okay, that's good. Get in touch if you fancy being on. And Adam, how can people catch up with your work?
You can visit my website, adambowie.com, and find me on the usual socials.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And if you got this far, make sure you have claimed your membership of the Media Club. It's really easy and free. Just go to themediaclub.com. That's themediaclub.com and give us your email address. My name's Matt Deegan. The producer was Matt Hill. It was a Rethink audio production with video support from Podcast Discovery. I'll see you next week.